What happens when a man builds a glittering empire with his mistress, believing he's the king of his own creation? He places her on a throne beside him, parading their success as a testament to their passion and brilliance. He feels untouchable. But what if the entire kingdom, the castle, the crown, the very ground beneath his feet, was silently, meticulously, and legally owned by the wife he so publicly betrayed? This isn't a story about a simple affair. This is the story of Jacob Croft, a man who thought he was a self-made titan, and his wife, Serafina Vanderbilt, the silent billionaire who reminded him that you can't steal a house you were only ever allowed to live in. Prepare for a masterclass in revenge, served not cold, but at a perfect, room-temperatured, and publicly humiliating degree. The air in the Upper East Side penthouse was different. It was thinner, crisper, filtered by a state-of-the-art HVAC system and costing, Jacob Croft often joked, more per cubic foot than the vintage champagne they served at their galas. From their 80th floor vantage point, Central Park was a perfect manicured rectangle of green, a world away from the gritty, ambitious streets where Jacob had started. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of Macallan 25 in hand, the amber liquid catching the last rays of the setting sun. He looked the part of the man who had everything. The Tom Ford suit was impeccably tailored, the Patek Philippe on his wrist a subtle nod to his success. His wife, Serafina Vanderbilt, entered the room. She didn't make a sound. She moved with the kind of inherited grace that couldn't be taught, a stillness that often unnerved Jacob. She was beautiful, not in the flashy, demanding way of the women he saw at board meetings, but in the way a classical sculpture is beautiful, permanent, and a little cold to the touch. Her family, the Vanderbilts, hadn't just come over on the Mayflower. They had likely financed the voyage in several subsequent colonies. Their wealth was old, woven into the very fabric of New York City, and Serafina was its quiet heiress. "The driver is waiting, Jacob," she said, her voice calm and even. She adjusted one of the minimalist silver sculptures on the mantelpiece, a piece by a Japanese artist he could never remember. "We can't be late for the Guggenheim International Gala." "Of course, darling," he replied, turning with a smile that he had practiced to perfection. It was his successful, adoring husband's smile. Wouldn't want to keep Anna Wintour waiting. Their life was a meticulously curated series of such events. Galas, charity auctions in the Hamptons, ski trips to Aspen with other titans of industry. To the outside world, they were a power couple. Jacob Croft, the dynamic founder and CEO of Aura Wellness, the fastest-growing luxury skincare brand in the country, and his elegant, philanthropic wife, Serafina. But the penthouse felt less like a home and more like a museum, Serafina's museum. Her family's money had paid for it. Her trust fund had provided the seed capital for Aura Wellness, a detail Jacob conveniently omitted in interviews. He was the face, the voice, the visionary. He told the story of starting with nothing but a dream and a revolutionary formula based on Arctic algae. The press loved it. They called him the King of Wellness. The problem was, the king felt like a consort. Serafina never flaunted her wealth, never belittled his ambition. In a way, it was worse. She was simply unconcerned. Her financial security was as certain as the sunrise. His, he felt, was a performance, a dance he had to keep doing perfectly, lest the music stop. He craved something that was unequivocally his, something born of his own sweat and genius, not her inherited privilege. And that's where Amber Novak came in. Amber was the head of product development at Aura Wellness. She was everything Serafina wasn't. Fiery, expressive, with a laugh that echoed in the hallway, and a mind that moved as fast as the city below their office. She had a sharp, angular beauty and a restless energy that matched Jacob's own. While Serafina's approval was a gentle, almost imperceptible nod, Amber's was a shot of adrenaline. "Jacob, that's brilliant," she'd say, her eyes wide with genuine excitement. "No one else is thinking like this." She saw him not as Serafina's husband, but as Jacob Croft, the visionary. She validated the image he so desperately wanted to be real. Their affair started, as most do, in the hazy territory of late-night work sessions and shared victories. A lingering touch over a lab sample. A business dinner that stretched past midnight, fueled by expensive wine and escalating confessions. With Amber, he felt seen. With her, he was the creator, the master of his universe. The sleek, minimalist office of Aura Wellness, with its white marble and brushed gold accents, felt more like his kingdom than the silent, opulent penthouse he shared with his wife. The turning point came when Aura Wellness landed a coveted feature in Vogue. The article praised the brand's meteoric rise, focusing almost entirely on Jacob's leadership and innate understanding of modern luxury. It mentioned Amber Novak as his brilliant right hand. That evening, Jacob brought the magazine home. He left it on the marble kitchen island. Serafina picked it up, her expression unreadable as she scanned the glossy pages. "That's wonderful, Jacob. Congratulations," she said, placing it back down precisely where she had found it. "The PR team did an excellent job." Her words, meant to be supportive, felt like a splash of cold water. The PR team. She saw it as a managed campaign, a successful transaction. She didn't see the sweat, the passion, the genius he shared with Amber. She saw a return on an investment. He walked away, a cold fury solidifying in his chest. He didn't want to be an investment. He wanted to be the founder, the owner, the king, and a king needed a queen who worshipped at his throne, not one who owned the castle. That night, as Serafina slept in their silent, temperature-controlled bedroom, Jacob was in a sleek downtown apartment with Amber, sketching out the future. His future. Their future. "It's not enough to be the face of the brand, Amber," he said, pacing her living room. "I need real equity. I need control. We need control. You're the one who perfected the formulas. You're the one driving the innovation. I'm the one who built the brand identity from nothing." Amber, wrapped in a silk robe, watched him, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "So what do you do, Jacob?" "It's her family's money that started it all. Isn't she the ultimate owner?" Jacob scoffed, a dismissive wave of his hand. "She's a passive investor. She signs checks. She doesn't understand the business, not really. She wouldn't even know how to log into our sales analytics. It's a legal structure, that's all. I run it. I built it. Morally, it's mine." He stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes intense. "And I want to make you a partner, a real partner, with a stake in the company. You deserve it." Amber's breath hitched. This was more than she had dreamed of. Partnership, a share in an empire. "How? How can you do that if she's the investor?" "I'll handle Serafina," he said, with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I'll frame it as a crucial business decision, to retain top talent, to secure our future. She'll have to agree. What choice does she have? Without me and without you, Aura Wellness is just a name on a bottle." He believed it. He had repeated the lie to himself so many times that it had become his truth. He was the sun, and Aura Wellness was the planet that revolved around him. He had completely forgotten who owned the galaxy. The conversation with Serafina was one Jacob had rehearsed a dozen times in his head. He'd pick the right moment, a quiet Sunday morning perhaps, over coffee in the Financial Times. He would be calm, rational, presenting it as a masterstroke of business strategy. He found her in the small, sunlit library of their penthouse, a room he rarely entered. It was filled with first editions and leather-bound classics from her grandfather. She was reading, a cashmere throw over her lap. She looked up as he entered, a bookmark already in her hand. She was always prepared. "Serafina, darling, do you have a moment?" he began, striking a casual pose against a bookshelf. "Of course, Jacob." She closed the book, her full attention on him. It was an unnerving habit of hers. When she listened, she truly listened, her gray eyes missing nothing. He launched into his prepared speech. He spoke of market volatility, of competitors trying to poach top talent. He lauded Amber Novak's irreplaceability, her unique genius for formulation chemistry that was central to their success. He painted a picture of a future where Amber, feeling undervalued, could walk away, taking her knowledge with her and potentially starting a rival brand. "So," he concluded, trying to keep his voice steady, "I've decided the only prudent course of action is to make her a partner. I'm restructuring the executive compensation pool. I'm awarding her a 5% stake in the company, vested over 3 years. It's the best way to secure our asset and incentivize her for the long haul." He watched her, waiting for the questions, the arguments, the concerns about diluting the value. He was ready to counter every point. Serafina was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant, as if she were calculating complex variables in her head. Jacob felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. Then she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. If you believe it's essential for the stability and growth of the business, Jacob, then you have my support. Jacob was so stunned by the lack of resistance, he almost stammered. Really? That's it? A faint, enigmatic smile touched her lips. You are the CEO. I trust you to make the decisions you feel are necessary to protect the company. Just have our lawyer, Marcus Thorne, draw up the paperwork. I'll sign whatever is needed. He felt a surge of triumph, so powerful it was dizzying. It was that simple. She didn't even care. It proved his theory. She was just a name on a document, a passive, disinterested benefactor. He was the true power. Excellent, darling. Truly. This is a huge step forward for us, he said, his relief making him magnanimous. For the company, she corrected him gently, opening her book again. The audience was over. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Jacob, feeling more powerful than ever, worked with the lawyers. His lawyers, he thought, though they were technically on the corporate payroll funded by Serafina's trust, to draft the partnership agreement for Amber. It was ironclad, giving her a 5% stake in Aura Wellness Inc. The day Amber signed the papers in the main conference room was a celebration. Jacob ordered champagne, the good stuff, not the vintage swill Serafina preferred. He and Amber stood side by side, glasses raised, looking out over the panoramic view of the city. To us, partner, Jacob toasted, his arm around her shoulder. To us, she repeated, her eyes shining. She felt like she had won the lottery. She had a piece of a multi-million-dollar company. She had the CEO. She had, in her mind, replaced the quiet, passionless woman in the penthouse. Their affair, now supercharged by their business partnership, became less discreet. They were a team, a unit. They traveled together for market research in Paris and Milan. They were seen at industry events, their body language screaming intimacy. Amber started to feel bold. She wasn't just the mistress anymore. She was a stakeholder. She began to overstep. She suggested a complete redesign of the executive suite, wanting a more synergistic and open layout, which coincidentally involved knocking down the wall between her office and Jacob's. She started making executive decisions without consulting the rest of the team, citing her new authority as a partner. She even had the audacity to comment on Jacob's home life. That penthouse is sterile, isn't it? She mused one evening as they lay in her bed. It's like living in an art gallery, all that cold marble and gray. We're vibrant. We should live somewhere with passion, with color. A Soho loft, maybe. Something with character. Something that's us. Jacob, caught up in the fantasy, agreed. You're right. It's Serafina's taste, not mine. The line between Jacob the CEO and Jacob the lover had completely dissolved. His judgment, once sharp and business-focused, was now clouded by his ego and his infatuation. He saw Aura Wellness not as a corporation, but as the physical manifestation of his relationship with Amber. Meanwhile, in the quiet penthouse, Serafina continued her routine. She attended her charity board meetings, oversaw the Vanderbilt Foundation's grants, and met weekly with one man Jacob had never paid much attention to, Marcus Thorne. Thorne was her family's lawyer, a man whose firm, Thorne and Sterling, had handled the Vanderbilt estate for 3 generations. He was sharp, impeccably dressed, and fiercely loyal. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a guardian of the family's legacy. When Jacob had proudly announced he was making Amber a partner, Marcus Thorne had been summoned to the penthouse. Serafina had presented the situation to him, her face as calm as ever. The paperwork Jacob's lawyers had drafted was, as expected, for Aura Wellness Inc. Marcus reviewed it, a slight frown on his face. He's giving her 5% of the subsidiary. Serafina looked out the window at the city her family had helped build. Yes, he believes he's giving away a piece of his kingdom. Marcus allowed himself a rare, thin smile. He doesn't seem to understand the corporate structure we put in place. He never asked, Serafina said simply. The structure was an elegant, almost invisible fortress of legal entities, designed by Marcus and Serafina's father years ago to protect the family's assets. The initial seed money for Aura Wellness hadn't come from a simple transfer from Serafina's trust. It had been funneled through Vanderbilt Capital Holdings, which was the sole owner of a parent company named SV Enterprises. SV Enterprises, for Serafina Vanderbilt, was the entity that wholly and completely owned 100% of Aura Wellness Inc. Jacob wasn't the owner of Aura Wellness. He was its president and CEO. He had been granted significant operational freedom, a generous salary, and performance-based bonuses that made him a multimillionaire in his own right. He had been given a magnificent sandbox to play in, complete with all the best toys. But Serafina, through SV Enterprises, owned the sandbox, the land it sat on, and the deed to the entire playground. The 5% stake Jacob was giving Amber was not 5% of the entire enterprise. It was 5% of his designated playground, an entity whose existence was entirely at the discretion of its sole shareholder, SV Enterprises. "So, you want me to approve this?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the partnership agreement. "Yes," Serafina said, turning from the window. Her eyes were like chips of ice. "Let him build it up with her. Let him pour his energy, his passion, his betrayal into it. Let him believe the throne he's built for his mistress is real." Marcus nodded, understanding perfectly. The higher he builds it, the harder the fall will be when he discovers it's all been built on land he never owned. "Exactly," Serafina said. "Let him give his partner her title and her paper shares. Let them celebrate. Every bottle of champagne they pop is a toast to their own delusion." She picked up the document, the one that would make Amber Novak a partner in her husband's eyes, and signed it with a steady hand. Her signature was a clean, elegant script. It wasn't an act of surrender. It was the setting of a trap. For a year, the kingdom of Jacob and Amber flourished. Aura Wellness saw its revenue double. They opened flagship stores in London and Dubai. Their partnership was hailed in business magazines as a dynamic fusion of vision and innovation. Jacob felt invincible. He had the thriving company, the passionate partner, and the quiet, compliant wife who funded his lifestyle without asking questions. He had it all. But success built on a lie is a fragile thing. The first cracks began to appear, not from the outside, but from within. Amber, now emboldened by her title and her perceived power, started to challenge Jacob. She was no longer the adoring subordinate. She was a partner, and she wanted her voice to carry equal weight. The argument started in the boardroom. She would openly disagree with his marketing strategies, pushing for edgier campaigns he felt were off-brand. "We need to be disruptive, Jacob," she'd argue in front of their executive team. "The minimalist, quiet luxury thing is Serafina's style. It's not us. We're bold." The tension bled into their personal life. The Soho loft they had dreamed of remained a fantasy, as Jacob couldn't bring himself to leave the Vanderbilt penthouse and the immense financial security it represented. "We'll do it when the time is right," he'd say, a line that started to sound hollow even to himself. Amber grew resentful. She had the title of partner, but she still felt like the other woman, hiding in the shadows of the immense, silent power of his wife. She wanted the public recognition. She wanted to be the woman on his arm at the Met Gala, not just at a trade show in Las Vegas. The true crisis, however, came from an unexpected quarter. Her name was Diana Finch, a tenacious investigative journalist for a rising digital media outlet known for taking down corporate giants. Finch had made her name on a series exposing greenwashing in the fashion industry, and now she had turned her sights on the wellness sector. Aura Wellness, with its celebrity endorsements and premium pricing, was a perfect target. Finch's investigation began quietly. She started digging into the brand's signature ingredient, the proprietary Arctic algae complex. Jacob had built a myth around it, of a rare, hand-harvested organism with miraculous regenerative properties. The marketing material was filled with images of pristine glaciers and crystal-clear Arctic waters. The truth was more prosaic. The algae was real, but it was cultivated in a high-tech lab in Belgium. While effective, it wasn't miraculous, and it certainly wasn't harvested by intrepid explorers in the Arctic Circle. The story was a brilliant piece of marketing fiction. Finch got a tip from a disgruntled former lab technician who had been fired by Amber in a fit of pique. The source gave her data, internal emails, and shipping manifests. She started piecing together a story of massive misrepresentation. The first sign of trouble was a call from their head of PR. Jacob, Diana Finch is asking for a comment on a story she's running about our supply chain. She's making some very specific claims about the origin of the algae. Jacob's blood ran cold. He tried to stonewall, to manage the situation. No comment. Tell her our formulas are proprietary. But Finch was relentless. She published her first article titled, Aura Wellness, the billion-dollar brand built on a fairy tale. It was a bombshell. It laid out, in meticulous detail, the discrepancy between Aura's marketing and the reality of their lab-grown main ingredient. It didn't accuse them of fraud. The product was safe and high quality, but it accused them of profound deception. For a brand built on authenticity and purity, it was a devastating blow. The fallout was immediate. The stock of their parent company, the one publicly traded competitor they benchmarked against, dipped. Social media erupted. Influencers who had been paid handsomely to promote Aura went silent. Saturday Night Live did a skit about a wellness guru harvesting magic kale from a puddle in his garage. The brand became a punchline. Jacob and Amber went into crisis mode. They locked themselves in the conference room, the celebratory champagne flutes of the previous year, a distant memory. The atmosphere was thick with panic and recrimination. "How did she find out?" Jacob yelled, throwing a stack of negative press clippings across the table. "Someone must have leaked it." "Well, it wasn't me," Amber snapped back, her face pale with stress. "Maybe if your marketing hadn't been so over the top, so ridiculously mythical, it wouldn't be this bad. My marketing, that marketing is what made us a billion-dollar brand. It was your job to secure the supply chain and manage the lab relationships. You were the one who fired that technician in Belgium. You created a loose end." Their partnership, forged in ambition and affair, couldn't withstand the pressure of a real crisis. The trust between them evaporated, replaced by suspicion and blame. They tried to fight back. They issued a press release calling the article misleading and a gross mischaracterization. They hired a crisis management firm, but they were out of their depth. Diana Finch wasn't just a journalist. She was a bulldog with a taste for blood. She published a follow-up piece, this time with leaked internal emails between Jacob and the marketing team, where he explicitly discussed crafting the Arctic narrative. His own words were being used as a weapon against him. Desperate, Jacob tried to leverage his connections, the ones he thought he had built. He called a contact at the Wall Street Journal, a man he'd golfed with in the Hamptons. The man was polite but distant. "Sorry, Jacob, this story has too much traction. My hands are tied." He and Amber were isolated. They were trying to put out a raging fire with water pistols. The crisis firm they hired was costing a fortune, eating into their profits. The flagship stores saw foot traffic plummet. Retail partners began to ask questions about canceling orders. The kingdom was crumbling. Throughout the entire 2-week ordeal, Serafina remained a silent observer. Jacob had expected a call, a panicked, "What is going on?" or a furious, "How could you let this happen?" He received nothing. Her silence was more unnerving than any tirade. He saw her in the mornings before he left for the office. She would be reading the paper, the business section with the latest bad news about Aura laid open beside her, and she would simply look up and say, "Good morning, Jacob," her voice devoid of any emotion. He couldn't understand it. It was her money on the line, her initial investment going up in flames. Why wasn't she terrified? Why wasn't she demanding action? Her calm felt unnatural, almost sinister. He was so consumed by his own panic that he failed to see it for what it was. The profound calm of someone who was never in danger. The calm of a chess master watching her opponent walk directly into a checkmate she had set up 10 moves ago. The final blow came not from Finch, but from a different entity entirely, the Federal Trade Commission. Tipped off by the public scandal, the FTC launched a formal inquiry into Aura Wellness's advertising practices for potential deceptive marketing. An official-looking letter arrived by courier, demanding years of documentation, internal communications, and financial records. This was no longer just a PR crisis. This was a legal threat that could result in millions in fines, forced rebranding, and potentially the end of the company as they knew it. Jacob sat in his office, the letter trembling in his hand. Amber stood across from him, her bravado completely gone, replaced by raw fear. "What do we do?" she whispered. "Jacob, what do we do?" He had no answer. He had run out of moves. The king was cornered, his paper throne turning to ash. It was then that his assistant buzzed him. "Sir, Marcus Thorne is on the line for you." "He says it's urgent." Marcus Thorne, Seraphina's lawyer. Jacob's heart sank. The silence was over. The real owner of the board was about to make her move. The summons did not arrive as a polite request. It was a digital command, an email from the office of Marcus Thorne with a subject line that felt like a death knell. Urgent and mandatory meeting of the Board of Aura Wellness Incorporated. The body of the message was brief, devoid of any nicety, specifying a time and place that was non-negotiable. 10 a.m. the following day, at the headquarters of Thorne and Sterling. Jacob's hands trembled as he read it. He immediately forwarded it to Amber, his own message a single frantic word. "Call me." When she did, her voice was tight with panic. "What is this? Why is he calling a meeting? You're the CEO, Jacob." "I don't know," he lied, a cold dread coiling in his stomach. He knew exactly what it was. It was a summons from the real power, the one he had so willfully ignored. "We need to present a united front," he instructed, his voice a poor imitation of his usual confident tone. "We go in there, we lay out our recovery plan, we show them we have it under control. We are the leaders of this company. They can't do anything without us." They spent the night huddled in Amber's apartment, papers spread across the coffee table, trying to cobble together a strategy. But their frantic energy was underpinned by a shared terror. The bravado and passion that had fueled their rise was gone, replaced by the grim reality of two co-conspirators about to face a judge they couldn't bribe or charm. The next morning, the taxi ride to Midtown was silent and heavy. The trendy, vibrant aesthetic of their own office, with its sun-drenched white marble and optimistic greenery, was a world away from the destination. Thorne and Sterling occupied 4 floors of a granite-faced skyscraper that seemed to absorb the city's light rather than reflect it. The lobby was a cavern of hushed reverence, where the only sounds were the soft whisper of expensive shoes on polished stone and the distant rhythmic ticking of a massive grandfather clock. After announcing themselves to a receptionist who regarded them with glacial indifference, they were led down a long, thickly carpeted hallway. The walls were lined with oil portraits of stern-faced men, the firm's founders and past senior partners, generations of Vanderbilt's guardians. It wasn't a law office, it was a mausoleum of power, and Jacob felt like a trespasser at his own funeral. The conference room was even more intimidating. A colossal mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine, dominated the space. The air smelled of old leather, wood polish, and money so old it had forgotten how to shout. Marcus Thorne was already seated at the head of the table, looking as though he were a permanent fixture carved from the same unyielding material as the furniture. The 2 other non-executive board members, men Jacob had chosen for their passivity, were already there, looking pale and uncomfortable, fidgeting with their water glasses. Jacob and Amber took their seats, the plush leather chairs sighing under their weight. Jacob arranged his files in front of him, a pathetic attempt to project control. Thorne waited for the door to click shut before he spoke, his voice as flat and cold as a slab of marble. "Thank you for coming. As you are aware, the company is facing an unprecedented crisis. The FTC inquiry, coupled with the catastrophic reputational damage from recent media reports, has put the entire enterprise at risk." Jacob cleared his throat, launching into his rehearsed defense. "Marcus, I understand the concern, but we have a robust plan in place. Our crisis management team is preparing a comprehensive response to the FTC. We are in the final stages of securing a new celebrity ambassador, think someone on the level of Jennifer Lawrence, to headline a campaign focused on rebuilding consumer trust. This is a significant storm, I grant you, but it is one we are fully equipped to weather. We just need to hold our nerve." He looked around the table for support, but the other board members avoided his gaze. Thorne listened without interruption, his steepled fingers hiding any expression. When Jacob finished, the silence stretched for an agonizingly long moment. Then Thorne lowered his hands. "Your plan," he began, the words dripping with disdain, "is insufficient. Your leadership has been reckless, and your management has been compromised. The sole shareholder of this enterprise has lost all confidence in your ability to steer the ship. In fact, it has been determined that you're the storm." Amber, unable to stay silent, shot back. "The sole shareholder? Serafina hasn't said a word, and I am a 5% partner in this company. I have a right to—" "You have a right to remain silent and listen, Ms. Novak," Thorne cut in, his voice like cracking ice. He nodded to one of his junior associates. "Lights, please." The room darkened, and a projector hummed to life, casting a bright rectangle onto a hidden screen that descended from the ceiling. A corporate organizational chart appeared. It was elegantly simple and utterly devastating. "Let me provide you both with a lesson in corporate structure, as you seem to be fundamentally mistaken about your positions," Thorne narrated, using a laser pointer to trace the lines of power. At the bottom was a familiar box, Aura Wellness Inc. Inside, in smaller font, J. Croft, CEO, A. Novak, Partner, 5%. "Here is the entity you believe you control," Thorne said. The red dot of the laser pointer moved up, following an arrow to a box above it. "However, Aura Wellness Inc. is wholly owned, 100% of its shares, by a parent company. That company is SV Enterprises." Jacob stared at the letters. SV. The air in his lungs turned to ice. He could feel Amber's sharp intake of breath beside him. It couldn't be. "SV Enterprises," Thorne continued, his voice relentless, "was incorporated on the same day as Aura Wellness. It was designed as a legal firewall and the primary vehicle for all capital investment into the brand. Its purpose was to own and oversee the operational subsidiary, which you, Jacob, were hired to manage." The laser pointer moved up again, to the final box at the top of the chart, from which all power flowed. "Vanderbilt Capital Holdings. And SV Enterprises," Thorne concluded, "is in turn a wholly owned subsidiary of the Vanderbilt family's primary private investment firm. The seed money, the expansion capital, every dollar that built your offices and paid your salaries, flowed down this precise chain of command." The lights came back on, but the room felt darker than before. Jacob was speechless, his mind reeling. He wasn't the founder. He wasn't the king. He was the manager of a remote division, a high-level employee in a vast invisible empire he never even knew existed. Amber's face was a mask of white-hot fury and dawning horror. She turned on Jacob, her whisper a venomous hiss that carried across the table. "What is this? Jacob, you told me she was a silent partner, a simple investor. You swore to me this was yours." I didn't know," he stammered, the words hollow and pathetic. "You didn't know because you never asked," Thorne said coolly. "You were so enamored with the reflection in the mirror, you never bothered to check who owned the glass." At that precise moment, the grand mahogany door opened. Serafina Vanderbilt entered. She was not the wife he knew, the woman of soft cashmere and quiet grace. This was a different person entirely. She wore a bespoke graphite gray suit, the tailoring sharp and severe. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, polished chignon, and her only jewelry was a pair of discreet diamond studs that glittered like ice chips. She walked not with the stillness he was used to, but with the purposeful, resolute stride of a general entering a war room. She was wearing her power like armor. She took the empty seat beside Marcus Thorne, placing a slim leather portfolio on the table before her. She radiated an aura of absolute authority that silenced the room. Her gaze swept over the table, bypassing Jacob and Amber as if they were empty chairs, and addressed the room at large. "Good morning," she said, her voice crisp and clear, resonating with a command he had never heard from her before. "I have convened this meeting to enact a change in course. This brand was founded on a principle of quiet confidence and verifiable excellence. It was designed to reflect integrity. The former management, however, chose to rebuild it in their own image, loud, reckless, and based on a foundation of fiction. That ends today." She opened her portfolio. Effective immediately by a unanimous vote of the Board of SV Enterprises, we are taking direct and active control of our subsidiary, Aura Wellness. As the first step in restoring the brand's integrity, the positions of Chief Executive Officer and Head of Product Development are terminated. For cause. Thorne slid 2 envelopes across the table. They stopped perfectly in front of Jacob and Amber. Termination letters. Jacob finally found his voice, a strangled gasp. Terminated? Serafina, you can't. I built this company with my bare hands. For the first time, she turned her full attention to him. Her gray eyes were not angry or hurt. They were cold, clear, and utterly dispassionate, like a scientist observing a failed experiment. You managed it, Jacob. You were given a magnificent budget and a long leash. You could have built a lasting legacy. Instead, you built a monument to your own ego and exposed this company, my company, to public ridicule and federal investigation. Your employment contract clearly outlines termination for cause in the event of gross negligence or acts that bring the firm into disrepute. I believe this situation more than qualifies. She then shifted her gaze to Amber, who flinched as if struck. Ms. Novak, your partnership agreement, which you seem to hold in such high regard, is now null and void per Section 7B, which covers malfeasance and actions detrimental to the company's value. Your 5% of a subsidiary whose value you helped decimate is now 0. Furthermore, the extensive non-compete clause you signed is fully active and will be aggressively enforced by Thorne and Sterling. You were entrusted with proprietary knowledge. You will not be taking that knowledge elsewhere. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle like a shroud. A new, highly respected CEO will be starting on Monday. A press release is scheduled for noon today, announcing the leadership change and my new role. I will be stepping in as chairwoman of the board to personally oversee the brand's restoration. It was a complete and total erasure. Jacob, stripped of everything, was left with only one desperate, pathetic card to play. He looked at the woman who was still, for a few more hours, his wife. Serafina. Please, he whispered, the sound pathetic in the vast, silent room. Her expression didn't soften. Please what, Jacob? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Please allow you to continue this charade. The time for please was before you chose infidelity over loyalty and deceit over the truth. You made a series of choices. This is the consequence. She stood up, her movement signaling the meeting, and his life as he knew it was over. As for our personal arrangements, she added, delivering the final, clinical blows, they are concluded. The locks on the penthouse have already been changed. You will find your access has been revoked. A security detail is at the apartment to oversee the packing of your effects. You may have them sent to an address of your choosing. My personal attorney will be filing for divorce this afternoon. I believe you'll find our prenuptial agreement to be as ironclad as your employment contract. She turned to her lawyer. Marcus, handle the remaining details. Without a backward glance, she walked out of the room, leaving behind the smoldering wreckage of 2 careers and 1 marriage, the sound of the heavy door clicking shut echoing like a final, absolute judgment. The fallout was not a slow decay, it was a detonation. The press release crafted by Serafina's team, spearheaded by the formidable Marcus Thorne, was a masterpiece of corporate assassination. It landed in the inboxes of every major news outlet, financial analyst and industry blogger simultaneously. It didn't just announce a leadership change, it rewrote history in real time. The narrative was powerful and irresistible. Serafina Vanderbilt, the quiet, visionary founder and financier, had been forced to step out from behind the curtain to salvage her creation from the reckless mismanagement and ethically compromised leadership of her former CEO. Jacob Croft's name was mentioned only in the context of his termination. The phrase misguided marketing strategies was a surgical euphemism for the lies he had told. His affair with Amber wasn't named, but the release's reference to a breach of professional conduct and a conflict of interest that exposed the company to severe reputational and legal risk left nothing to the imagination. The public, which loves a story of hubris and downfall as much as it loves a comeback, devoured it. Jacob, sitting in Amber's apartment as the news broke, watched his life disintegrate on his phone screen. His Google alerts, once a stream of praise, became a torrent of digital scorn. Aura fallout was trending on Twitter. He tried calling his most trusted contact at the Wall Street Journal, a man with whom he'd shared cigars and boasts of future conquests. He didn't get past the man's assistant. "Mr. Davenport is in a meeting," she said, her voice dripping with practiced disinterest. He tried his friend from a venture capital firm. The call went straight to voicemail. The invisible walls of the city's elite had gone up, and he was definitively on the outside. Stripped of their titles, their status, and their shared purpose, Jacob and Amber turned on each other with the ferocity of cornered animals. The sleek, modern apartment that had been their secret sanctuary became a pressure cooker of blame. "This is your fault," Jacob snarled one evening, gesturing wildly at the television where a business news anchor was dissecting his demise. "Your sloppiness. You just had to fire that technician in Belgium, didn't you? You couldn't manage one disgruntled employee, and now look at us." Amber, her face pale and drawn, laughed a bitter, broken laugh. "My fault? I was managing a lab while you were playing God. You're the one who built this entire brand on a lie you started to believe yourself. And you lied to me, Jacob. You looked me in the eye and sold me a fantasy that we were partners, that we were building our empire. You were too arrogant to even read your own employment contract. You weren't a king, you were the court jester, and you were too blind to see the strings on your back, all of them leading to her." The accusation hit its mark because it was true. He had been a fool, intoxicated by the reflection Serafina had allowed him to see in her mirror. The fight escalated, their words growing more venomous, each trying to wound the other to distract from their own gaping failure. Their passion, born in the heat of ambition, died in the cold reality of their shared ruin. A few weeks later, after a final, screaming match over who was going to pay the rent, Jacob packed a single expensive suitcase, a relic from his former life, and left. His fall was graceless. He sold his Patek Philippe watch for a fraction of its value to make ends meet. He tried to leverage his experience, but his name was poison. The non-compete clause in his termination papers, enforced by the ever-watchful Thorne and Sterling, was an iron cage, preventing him from working for any competitor of substance. He was forced to swallow his pride and take a low-level consulting job for a small, struggling cosmetics company in Ohio. His new office wasn't a sleek penthouse overlooking the city. It was a drab cubicle in a corporate park off the highway. Jacob Croft, the former king of wellness, now spent his days trying to help a regional brand crack the Walmart account. His past glory, a private, humiliating ghost. Amber's fate was a mirror of his own, but perhaps more tragic. She had hitched her entire identity to the dream of being a partner, a power player. She hired a lawyer to fight the non-compete, but the man just shook his head after reviewing the document signed by Thorne. "Ms. Novak," he said gently, "you would need an army and a fortune to fight this. You were outmaneuvered from the moment you signed it." Defeated, she was forced to abandon her passion and expertise. The brilliant formulation chemist, who once commanded a multi-million-dollar R&D budget, ended up taking a mid-level logistics management job for a shipping company, a world of spreadsheets and delivery schedules, a universe away from the glamour she had so briefly touched. While they faded into obscurity, Serafina Vanderbilt rose like a phoenix. She didn't just rebrand Aura Wellness, she resurrected it. Under the new name SVI Lux, the company's entire philosophy was transformed. The old myth of Arctic algae was replaced with a story of scientific integrity and heritage. The new tagline, "Verifiable Luxury, Inherited Wisdom," was a quiet masterstroke. Serafina herself became the brand. She sat for a single, expansive interview with the Wall Street Journal. Photographed in the Belgian lab, looking poised and authoritative in a crisp white lab coat over a tailored dress, she was the embodiment of the new brand. When asked about her ex-husband, her expression didn't flicker. "My family has always believed in building things that last," she stated, her voice calm and measured. "My focus is, and always has been, the integrity of the product and the trust of our customers. When I saw that both were being compromised, I took the necessary steps to protect my investment and reaffirm our core values." The new marketing campaign was a revelation. It featured close-ups of the scientific process, interviews with the PhD chemists on her team, and a traceable ingredient list for every product. It was radical transparency as the ultimate luxury. The market didn't just approve, it fell in love. Wealthy consumers, tired of marketing fluff, flocked to the brand. At lunches in Upper East Side bistros, the story was whispered with admiration. "Did you hear? She owned it the entire time. He was just running it for her. I'm switching from La Mer. I want to support her." The FTC inquiry concluded with a manageable fine, which Serafina's new company paid without comment, its cooperation and new direction praised by the commission. SV Lux's profits in its first year surpassed Aura Wellness's best year by 30%. Serafina, once a silent figure in the society pages, was now lauded on the covers of Forbes and Fortune, a new icon of female leadership and quiet strength. One crisp autumn evening, a year after the reckoning, Serafina stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse. The city glittered below, no longer a backdrop for her husband's ambition, but a kingdom she commanded. The divorce was final. The apartment, once a silent museum of her taste, now felt like a true home. Her home. She had proven herself not just a worthy steward of the Vanderbilt legacy, but a brilliant architect in her own right, honoring her father's shrewdness by not just preserving wealth, but by defending it and making it grow. She held a cup of jasmine tea, its warmth seeping into her hands. There was no bitterness in her heart, no giddy thrill of victory. There was only the profound, satisfying calm that comes from a complex plan perfectly executed. She hadn't just fired her husband and his mistress, she had dismantled the very reality they thought they had created, revealing it to be nothing more than a stage she had built and could tear down at will. She had taken back her company, her money, and most importantly, her name. She was no longer Serafina Vanderbilt Croft, the elegant wife. She was Serafina Vanderbilt, the woman who had built an empire, let a fool play king for a day, and then, when the time was right, had calmly, quietly, and completely reclaimed her throne. That, right there, is a masterclass in the long game. It's a story that proves real power isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about owning the room itself. Serafina Vanderbilt didn't just win a battle over an affair. She won a war for her own identity, leveraging the very tools of her gilded cage, her wealth, her connections, and her formidable intelligence, to dismantle the fantasy world her husband and his mistress had built. She reminded everyone that a throne given can always be taken away, especially when you're the one who funded its construction from the start. If this story of calculated revenge and ultimate justice captivated you, and if you believe in the power of a queen expertly checking a king, then don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story of epic karmic payback, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into real-life dramas where the stakes are high, and the truth is always the final twist.